recording. Good afternoon once again. This is James Kemper. I'm president of W.H. Mean & Associates. We are the manufacturing recruiter. I want to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. We actually have a pretty good program for you. We do industry presentations and online seminars like this throughout the year. And it has been a while since we've done our last one, but we wanted to make sure that the topic we had and the presenter we had would be certainly worth your time. And I believe we've done that today. But today we have Steve Edwards. He is from Five Eye Manufacturing Consultants. And he and his partners, Dwayne Schuler and Pat McDonald, you can see their names on the screen, are putting together a book on the ideal factory. And whole point on this is how you can take manufacturing and to create an environment that is going to make it as attractive and interesting as Silicon Valley is for IT and software folks. So for the next 30 minutes, Steve is going to go over the who they are, what they are doing, and the book, which will be available spring of 2017. So good time to get in early and get that book reserved. With that, I'm just going to hand this over to Steve. Steve, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, James. I certainly appreciate the opportunity, and especially to share about the ideal factory. Also, just want to thank everyone for being here today. We should have some question and answer time at the end, so if you get questions along the way, just kind of hang on to them and jot them down, and we'll see about getting them answered. As James said, I'm one of the three principals at Five Eye Manufacturing. My other two partners are here today for moral support, which I appreciate. But between the three of us, we've got over 70 years of manufacturing experience. So when we formed Five Eye, we had a fairly good idea of what we were going to try to accomplish. And one of those things was the ideal factory. And this is an idea about bringing the manufacturing firms, many of which we've had the opportunity to be in and also to work in, and to bring them up to a higher standard. We always hear about world class, but we like the idea of an ideal factory because we think that ideal is a reflection of the best, and we think there's a lot of opportunity out there to produce that. The second thing that we wanted to address was this brain drain that we see going on with the tech sector, especially because, as you know, James in the introduction talked about Apple and tech firms that have kind of garnered the spotlight, if you will, and been the go-to place for a lot of the best and the brightest that's coming out of our universities today. We feel like that the manufacturing firm can be a part of that, or should be a larger part of that. And you know, to kind of quote some of the folks that I run into in the factory, we'd like to make factory cool again. So with those ideas in place, I want to get started and just kind of briefly ask what the ideal factory is. Ideal we defined as the perfect or the best possible, and factory we defined as where people use machines to manufacture a product. We want to kind of keep you focused on the ideal part there because we're going to talk about that a little later on. But we want to start off by saying, what do you think the ideal factory is? And to be quite frank with you, this is kind of my idea. I'd like to see manufacturing like a coffee shop. It's going to have great Wi-Fi. That's where my friends go. It's where I get some of my work done. And most importantly, the stress level is next to zero. However, during my time in manufacturing, this is actually a little closer to what my experience was. It was tied up in a traffic jam. It was frustrating. I inched along at an unbelievably slow pace trying to get things done. And in addition to that, the frustration level and my stress level was through the roof. And when I was working this slide was very much my reality. I hustled constantly to make my tack time so that the next guy could make his tack time, so that the next guy could make his tack time. And you get the idea here. We know it's not the ideal way to work, but it was our reality. It's how it was. So the question comes, why change? And Mr. Dillon here penned these words about 52 years ago. The times they are changing. And with the advent of the computer age, with all the tech that we have going on, we've seen this more and more. We know the times are changing. They're changing now, and they'll change in the future, and they're moving at a faster and quicker rate. We in the manufacturing firm simply need to keep pace. And I'm not sure that we're doing that. The world changes constantly, and you've always heard the phrase, you don't change, you die. And that's the last thing we want. How do we do it? Well, Mr. Jobs says you think different. And although those are two easily spoken words, the reality is much, much different. One of my favorite phrases is the devil is always in the details. And boy, if that was the case, this is it. How do we go about doing it? How do we think differently? What does that mean? This next slide is one of my favorites. Oops, a little ahead of myself there. This slide is one of my favorites. It's been around the internet for several years. Many of you have probably seen it. It is success and what people think it looks like on the left there, and on the right is what it really looks like. And that's, this slide is true with no matter what you're doing in life, whether it be your marriage or going to school, working in a factory, working in an office. Success is never a straight line. You've seen half the time you seem like you're going backwards as much as you're going forwards. This, the right has certainly been my experience. The interesting point here that I want to make, though, is if you'll notice at the top of each diagram on the left and the right, the arrow is still pointing up. It is still successful. And no matter how you get there, in the end, it's successful. So we'd like to think that the ideal factory will happen overnight. We know better. We know the reality is it'll be slow going. And the reality is it'll feel like at times we're going backwards instead of forwards. But up there in that right-hand corner is what we're shooting for, is that success. Now the way that we want to talk about what to do, or the details, if you will, and folks, obviously this is going to be just a thumbnail sketch. I mean, in the book we're going to go into much greater detail, but what we wanted to do is just give you an overview of the things that we think about when we think of the ideal factory. Paint, which is, we're talking about the environment, the process, in other words, how do we get things done, the planning that goes into how do we get things done, and then the people. So with paint, we are obviously not talking about just paint. This shot here is one of the ones that kind of reminds me of my days in the factory. You can see the haze there in the background. Arguably this is not the best health environment, but it is the reality. It's what we face. It's where we live. The idea here is this. This is what, this happens to be the VW plant in Wolfsburg, Germany. And as I said, note there, check out all the white. It is simply stunning. When you go in there, you almost feel like you have to wear sunglasses. It's bright. It's beautiful. The noise level is much, much less. It makes you want to get up in the morning and go to work. The other thing about using white is, this is something that's been around, this idea or this concept's been around for several years. You see it a lot in retail establishments. You see it in grocery stores. The shelving's white, the floors are white, the ceilings are white. It promotes a feeling of openness. And that's especially important sometimes in the factory, because the confines in the factory can be pretty tight at times. It brightens the air. It makes it it's brighter, it's more effective, the light works better in those environments, and the employees can really see what they're doing. Also, as you know, it helps with cleanliness. Of course, with 5S, we want to keep everything as clean and in place as possible, and this really helps to do that. And one of the last things that I feel like is when everything is white, it really highlights the if a machine is defective or leaking in any way, if there's a problem, you can detect it immediately. And this, of course, is going to help with the downtime or getting your PMs done. I remember early in my career working in a factory, I worked at a place where we got a new president. Within just a few weeks, he came in and put together a painting crew, and they went out on the floor and they took a particular section and they painted the overhead white, the machines white, the rollers were white, the floor was even white. And in all honesty, we thought, my goodness, what is this? This is a factory. It's not Betty Crocker's test kitchen, but it was beautiful. But we just didn't think it belonged in the factory. And the gentleman who actually worked in that area had been with the company 20 plus years, and to say that that he was rough would be an understatement. He was difficult to get along with. He wasn't one of these type of guys that patted you on the back or said good morning to you. But we noticed within a couple of weeks that as the material handlers would drive by, he'd throw up an arm and wave at them. And then one day we noticed him doing something that in 20 years of him being there, no one could ever remember him doing. And that was a material handler on a forklift came up, and this guy was unloading his parts. And when we asked him about it, he said, you know what? I don't know what it is, but it just feels better here. The environment makes a difference, folks. This next slide that I'm going to put up is about the process. And this is the early Ford shop. A good use of white, maybe, but still pretty dingy. And you can see the workers over here on the side, on the right-hand side, workers in the middle and the left, and what happens is these lines all come together at the end. This, incidentally, was taken over 100 years ago and kind of harkens back to that. The times they are changing. Oops, there we go. This is Honda USA. This is today. First of all, we can see that there's not as many people. The robots are doing an efficient job of moving this along the line. We also see a cleaner work environment. It's brighter and lighter. Although not everything is painted white here, it certainly is a lot more effusive than what we've seen before. And you can see the process is streamed considerably. I want to talk just a little bit about what we can do as far as how the on this next slide, what is the ideal best? In other words, what can we do to make these processes better? And the very first people that are on the line, I know that this is something that's been bandied about, you hear it talked about, and yet in practice it's not something that I've experienced very often. The people on the line know their process, and many times it's not something big. It's not something large that needs to be done. They're not asking for a complete rewrite of the line or their job or their work instructions. What they're asking for is something very simple, like, can we raise this table 2 or 3 inches? Or can we move what's on the right to what's on the left? The process. It's what helps make it ideal. This also brings us down to the planning. Team Silicon Valley is excellent at this. They get together, they form a team, they work as a collective, and they produce the very best that they can produce at that time. And they do that through very careful planning. This seems to be a major stumbling block we see going on in the workforce. We all know that planning needs to be done, and there needs to be short-term and long-term. We know that the long-term plans need to be tweaked according to the different business environments that we face throughout. But the truth is, the planning begins to ebb away. And after a while, what we see happening, and this may be a few years, even a decade or so, but the planning begins to ebb away at a time. And what we see is an emphasis on how can we get the maximum out of our people and our machines with the least amount of investment. And while that can be good, it can also be taken way too far, and it can become the focus. One of the things that we are an advocate of is the 4-day-a-week or 10 hours a day. And the reason for that is because it frees up time during the week that we can work on our PMs. When we're talking about an 8 or a 10-hour workday, we're talking about 8 hours productivity and 2 hours for where our employees can then become involved in continuous improvement, continuing education, and the machines can be worked on. The idea here is to keep Fridays free. If we need to go into overtime, we could do it on a Friday, but we still got that Saturday and Sunday for our associates to be with their family and their friends. This is what continuing education looks like. I talked about this a little bit. We think that the whole idea in continuing education spreads. You get that drop in the lake and you can see the concentric rings begin to spread out, and we see that often when we offer continuing education to people. The thing about continuing education is it has to fit their schedules. It has to be something they can do. It has to be realistic. And they've got to see value in it. They have to understand what to do and why to do it. Our people, as you've noticed, we've talked a lot here in the planning stages about the people. And this is a bad interview. We've all been there. This is where it starts. You bring them in and you think, oh my goodness, here we are. What do we do? They're not paying attention. They're not engaged. This is not a good hire. This is the good interview. This is what we want to see. We want to see engagement. There's excitement. There's, I want to do this. In hiring these people, it has to be a good match. This engagement has to transfer over into after they're hired. The training has got to take place. The simulation has got to be something that is real, where the company's goals are shared. One of the studies done recently that I came across said that only 14% of the manufacturing workforce can articulate the goal of the company. That's just flat not a good rate. We need to do something along those lines to bring these folks up to speed. They need to know what the goals are. And as those goals change, then they need to be articulated. People need to be kept in the loop. One of the ways, and I didn't even put any print on this because I think it's such a great slide. Everybody in this photo is one-on-one. There's no place for anybody to hide, and everybody's engaged. And that's what it's all about. One of the things that we suggest doing is bringing in speakers in that 2-hour period that folks would have throughout the day, to give them a chance to talk, to see another side of the coin, to broaden their vision. And for God's sakes, one of the most important things here when you bring in a speaker is to make sure that this man or this person is engaging to them, not just throwing up slides and reading them, but there's nothing worse than sitting through 35 or 40 minutes of just sheer, pure boredom. So make sure that those speakers are good and that they get the folks involved. They've got a plan, and it fits with the goals of the company. This is one of those slides that I know everybody recognizes. This guy, his name's Seth Godin. He is a well-known guru from the social and media world. He's written several books, one of which he says the tribes, not money or factories, will change the world. And I'm sure Seth thought this at that time. The idea being that Seth thinks that the factory's time has come and gone. And although Seth is a great guy and he's written many fantastic books and I've certainly learned a lot from him, I don't believe he's right. I think factories can change the world. And I believe that they can start by changing the people that work for them. Hiring the right people, training them, being engaged with them. I used to work for one firm years ago, and the president of the company would come out once a month on an afternoon after lunch, and he would just walk up to somebody, different places in the plant, and say to them, "You're done for the day. We'll pay you for the rest of the day. I'm taking over your job." And he would step into the line, or he would handle the forklift. He would unload trucks. He would work in the factory to clean restrooms. It was amazing, and the people respected him, and they followed him. That's what we need more of. Every once in a while, Steve Jobs says a product comes along that changes everything, and that's true. But I think sometimes a product is an idea. Here is something I found that in a book by Scott Blank called The Four Epiphanies. And this is the legendary hero is usually the founder of something. The founder of a new age, the founder of a new religion, founder of a new city, the founder of a new way of life. In order to found something new, one has to leave the old and go on a quest for the seed idea, the germinal idea that will have the potential of bringing forth that new thing. Well, folks, that's what I think factory is. I think it can be new. I think it can be something exciting. It's my sincere hope that you will embrace what you've heard today. You are the legendary hero. My partners and I believe that the ideal factory can change this world into a better place for all of us. And we know that starts with you. Now, one of the things that you've probably noticed throughout this webinar is the background noise. Well, let me tell you what, that background noise is nothing compared to what I've endured in the factory. I can remember at times getting off work, going out, sitting down in my vehicle, taking out my earplugs, and just sitting there, not even starting the engine, not turning on the radio, not doing anything, just sitting there and letting the silence seep into me. The last words there were, "We know this starts with you," and they do. We've got all kinds of ideas. We've got all kinds of plans, but it's nothing without the people to put them into place. Now, I said in the beginning that we'd have time for questions. I hope we do. James, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All righty. Do we have any questions out there, or anybody want to comment?
Yeah, the first question that we have is when you were talking about the 4 days a week, 10-hour workday. Is there any evidence of that working?
You know, I believe that there are some studies have been done to show that the overall morale increases when we go to a 10-hour workday. Unfortunately, as your listeners have probably already guessed, I'm doing this webinar from the road, and I'm actually in the middle of my local Starbucks, so I don't have that information at hand. Whoever asked that, if they want to take the time to send that question to me on the 5isystems.com website through the contact page, I'd be more than happy to get those studies and show them that information. I try to anytime the things that we do is based on what we've seen in our experience, and then we try to back that up with facts and figures. So, yeah, we've got that information. I'd be more than happy to share it with them.
Okay, and certainly don't be shy, folks. You can ask any questions that you have. We have from one of our participants, Chase Navarra, has, what types of goals will your company help me achieve if I were to hire you? Efficiency gains, employee engagement, scheduling, and planning recommendations. Yeah, that was actually, Chase was asking you that
Well,
directly
James,
regarding 5I.
yeah, and I appreciate that, and that's always a good question. You know, what can we do for you? As I said when I started, we've got about 70 years worth of experience in manufacturing between the three of us. What we think we can do and what we believe and what we've seen happen over time is that when we come into a company, we usually spend that first 2 weeks just interviewing the management and the floor personnel in the area that management's identified. Hey, this is an area that I want to see an increase, or I want this change, or I want something different. Usually it's in the form of productivity. It's the more for less. Many times it's not. Many times it's just, I need a cultural change. How do we go about doing that? And so for those 2 weeks, what we do is we interview everybody. We talk with them. We look at the processes. We see how the flow of the material is. Many times, and we do it from when the or to when it goes out on the back of a semi. And we make a comprehensive report. We put it all together and sit down, and then we work through what we call the 5I system, which is the investigate, interview. Then we identify what the issues are and how we can go about correcting them. Then we inform. We sit down and say, look, this is what it is. At that point in time, we allow the factory or the management staff to decide what they want to do. Do they want us to implement it, or do they want to do it? Or do they want to work in tandem? There's kind of a continuum there all the way across the spectrum to how much they want to be engaged or how much they want us to do, and we work with them on that. Then we do what we call the impact, which is we measure those responses, we measure the process, whatever it might be, and we set up the metrics and then deliver those to say, okay, this is where we were at in the beginning and this is where we're at now. We can, if the client wants, continue to measure those, or we can come back and do reinforcement training, which is probably one of my favorite things to do. I like coming back and making sure that those ideas and those concepts that we've put in place are maintained, that we don't get mission creep and it starts to kind of waver over, and you know, it doesn't become what we used to refer to as management's next big thing, which is just to be endured until we can go back to the way it was. So we'd like to show that those changes that we make are practical. There's common sense involved. Many times they're simple. We try to break the complexity down, and so that when we work with the rank and file, we can say, hey, this is why we're doing this. We can get buy-in from them. And I know that's kind of a long-winded answer. I apologize for that, but that's really my passion, is to see that change take place.
Okay, and let's see, what would be a good email for them to contact you regarding, you know, what you guys can do for them? Do you have a good email that you can share with them?
Oh, sure. It is S. Edwards, that's EDWARDS, at 5isystems.com. And again, as I said, I'm on the road, but folks, I work Saturdays and Sundays and whatnot, so please do not hesitate to send me an email. What I want to do is my goal is to always answer emails within 24 hours, and I usually get about 100 a day, so I shoot for 24 hours. I don't always make it, but that's what I shoot for.
Excellent, excellent. If there are no more questions, we will end this presentation now. You do have Steve's email, so I would encourage everyone that hears this is to get in contact with Steve. He's got a lot of good stuff, a lot of good ideas, and it certainly may be able to make your work environment a little more pleasant, make it a little more attractive than your competition. And at the end of the day, a positive work environment is a good work environment. And it comes to branding your company, a great place to work is worth millions in advertising. So with that, you will be getting a recording of this presentation. That'll probably arrive, the link in your email within about a day or so. So you can certainly look forward to that, hearing that again, and reach out to Steve. And with that, folks, I want to thank you and have a good day.